rain and weather might have something to do with it. Who knows? How has everybody's week been? Hello. Um, you know how we were talking about last week and the week before, just how the momentum sort of started downtown and in Toronto. And I talked with an agent yesterday, let's say, no, Monday. I talked with an agent Monday and about a property in Stony Creek. So just, Hamilton, South Hamilton, near the water area, that sort of Winona Beach area. And because I've got a client of mine moving from Toronto to that area from Etobicoke. And I was saying to him, I said, I gotta ask, like, this house seems really nicely priced, like seems like good value. Have you had any offers? And he said, ironically, no. We feel it's a 4 bedroom, 2,400 square foot, nicely done for 949.9. And yeah, and they've had it as high as a million 50. And we reduced, canceled, relist. And he said, I've had absolutely very little activity until this weekend. I had 7 showings. He said, in Stony Creek, Hamilton, $1 million is still a lot for when you can buy a house for 4, 5, 600. Now, older and stuff, but this is, nice 4 bedroom, 2-story, 2-car garage. And I said, well, I had to ask because I wanted to find out if you had an offer and maybe there was an issue with the home inspection. And he said, nothing. But he said, our buyer is a Toronto buyer. We know it's going to be a buyer moving west, southwest. And I said, well, ironically, my buyer's from Toronto, looking at selling and taking equity out and, still wants to be able to have room for his family. I said, so I'm gonna book a showing, but I just had to call because I wanted to find out, one, if you had any offers, and two, what kind of activity. And sure enough, he just said no, just in the last weekend, which tells me that, we talk about how the momentum starts in Toronto, starts moving. I know that Anita said she had 17 groups through her open house in Niagara Falls over the weekend. Okay. So that just, and now maybe with all this rain might set it back a bit, but consumers are out there. Consumers are looking for a reason, they're still looking for a deal, but they're also seeing sold signs. And so that's where they start thinking about, okay, that place that we were waiting for, well, all of a sudden it's sold, and a couple of them have had multiple offers. I know even client of ours that's looking in Kitchener, and not in a hurry, but some of the things that he's looking at have popped up sold. Now, he was looking in the fall and then stopped for a bit. So even he's saying, okay, I'm seeing that the market is moving. So he may make his decision earlier than later. So that's why it's really important to look at other areas and just see where the momentum is, because history has shown us when the real estate side, once it gets busy in one location, as that activity builds up, then you start finding where that momentum will just move out further. Okay. And it's just same thing. First time home buyers will be the first people in the market during the beginning of the year. Now we're starting to see that first time home buyer price sell. And now those people are looking at, okay, where do we go? What can we buy? That's what I'm seeing. I don't know if anybody else is seeing anything different. I know, Nancy, you were saying that all of a sudden, just in the last little bit, you got more buyers that seem to be interested in starting to look and things. So, yeah, Julia.
I'm only sitting on a lease right now as a listing, but all of a sudden I was texting with my client last night who's in a different time zone, and I said, yeah, I'm really sorry there hasn't been much activity, but I got 2 reach outs today. And then as I was talking to him, I got 3 more.
Wow.
So it's been
Yeah.
nothing. And then the last 2 days, a lot of reach outs. So maybe it's
Yeah.
just the snowbanks are gone and people are looking to get going.
And it's been a long, cold winter. It's been a
Yes.
lot of, there's been a lot of uncertainty. Some of that seems to be starting to dwindle with some of the uncertainty. Yeah, it's still going to be there, but I think what's happening is our consumers now are going like, okay, if this is the reality, I get it. Let's move on versus waiting. I've had a couple of my clients basically go, okay, we got to make a decision. We can't wait another year or two just to wait and see what happens. So let's talk about doing it. And I think that just seems to be the consumer. Now, we've been going through this since really February 2022 was the peak, and then it started declining from there. So we're well into 4 years of an adjustment period. Yeah, Julia.
I've had a couple people say to me or ask the question, or make statements, I'm still waiting for the bottom. So I think that's an interesting call for conversation for us to have, because I'm kind of thinking that we've hit the bottom, but
Well, easiest way to
and
answer.
how close to
Which
the bottom
area,
do you really need to be at if you're
so
looking
which
to.
area is this person looking? Which area is this person looking?
Well, I've had the comment from more than one person. I was out of town on the weekend, so it's a lot of different areas. I was out of town
Okay.
talking to people from all over the place in Ontario, but um, mhm.
So here's what I would do. To be able to express that to them, and similar to what we just talked about, is the momentum always will start in a major city. It'll always end faster in a major city. And that's why you see the major cities will have such high highs and low lows. Whereas you can get into communities where the communities like say Sudbury or North Bay, you will know they had during COVID, they had just unforeseen activity because of a very specific reason. But now, if you go back into history, they have, and just what Steve Bernay was saying about Ottawa, it'll have slow rise and a slow fall. Well, today, if you look at a couple of the communities, and Julie, you'd be very familiar because you were help guiding us, the Danforth and the High Park area. Go back and see what a property was selling for in October, November. Today, it's higher because just in the last 30 days, properties that I even know we were showing that they were looking at selling in the fall, took it off, and then put it on and got multiple offers and sold. So in Toronto, the momentum has started, and now we're starting to see that. So to answer their question would be, in the communities of the city, for instance, Tina Klein, I talked with her on Monday, sold 4 houses in the last week. Properties that she wasn't even getting activity on in January. So that momentum from the Danforth, the momentum from, let's call it, mid Etobicoke, South Etobicoke, High Park area, that's now pushed up into Rexdale area. I was in Islington and Finch doing an evaluation yesterday, and it's an evaluation for an estate. And I just said, look, if you guys can wait for the letter, there's been 3 properties that were sitting, but they all sold conditionally this over the weekend. So let's wait and see what they sell for so I can give you a realistic price and let you know what's going on. That's how I would tell the story. If someone asked me that question, are we at the bottom? My thing is in the major areas, we've actually seen prices rise, and I know you're not going to hear about it in the news or in the media until after it's already done. It's already started. So if someone bought something in Hyde Park in October, November, December, today they're paying more for it. And that will start transpiring over to other areas. So that's how I would answer it and say, in my opinion, we're at the bottom. Unless there's an outside force that changes this momentum, yeah, we're going to have a traditional, gradual, busy fall, busy spring. We see activity, we see prices go up. Usually in the summer, activity slows down. So you might get an average price dip depending on where, how high one of the properties is that sold in the fall. But I've been telling lots of my clients that, you got to get out. And if you're looking to buy, now's the time to buy. I don't know if that helps, but that's how I would compare it to letting them know how the momentum is going, and that there's a lot more sold signs than there were a month and a half ago.
I 100% agree with everything you said. And I just thought it was so interesting that so many people asked using those words, waiting for the bottom. And
Yeah,
mhm.
because there are some people still out there thinking this is just a blip, but that we're going to see there's going to be another world event that's going to slow the market down, and we're going to see a pullback because of the words recession, inflation. Okay, that is where consumers will hear that and they'll go, oh, well, that's automatically going to bring the prices down.
And
Except
interest rates
one of
up, likely.
yeah, yeah, and interest rates up. So what happens is when you start hearing the interest rates up, that's why all these consumers are dropped in, because have dropped and have started, is because they were waiting for the interest rates to fall. And so when the verbiage comes out and it's no, the interest rates aren't going to fall, they might go up by the end of the year, people are jumping in.
Mhm.
But there are lots of buyers out there right now. So when I get asked that question, and it's out there, and that's where I say to them, I said, absolutely, you're going to hear about inflationary issues. You're going to hear about the interest rates going up. But what happens is you don't hear about the activity in the sales until 30 to 45 days after we've already seen it, and when we're seeing it. Then that's right. So that's how I would answer it. And then if you have a specific area, just go back and you can, again, you can either use the home price index, you could, depending on which system you're using, that Habistat now can really dial into communities because it will change. Like, I'm showing stuff in Stony Creek, Hamilton, Stony Creek. If you're on one side of the QE or the other side of the QE, there's a price difference just on, so it's each neighborhood will have different activity. So, what else? Activity in the condo market. Anything, Julie, are you seeing anything in sales in the condo market?
So if I were to use, for an example, the two buildings that I sold in this year, one in King West and one down on Front Street. The inventory that was there when I sold is still there. I did see that one got an offer last night or 2 nights ago, but I also saw those units getting one-off offers often, so I expect they were just super low offers and they dwindled away. So not really. I
Okay.
have noticed a couple higher end units, like larger units, over the 1.3 million mark, getting some traction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the interesting part is the educated investors, the educated buyers, people with money, for instance, they started buying 6 months ago. So, and they're still out there now. I had a discussion yesterday. I had luncheon with a builder yesterday. And he said just the activity online from consumers has increased. Now, lots of that could be because of the fact of the HST GST rebate, Because I even know, even my client looking in in Kitchener said, "Well, with this rebate though, can we now look at new houses too?" Because he said now that might bring the new houses into range where resales were, lower in price compared to the new stuff. And so if nothing else, you got to make sure that you've educated yourself. Obviously, let them know it's not law yet, but let them understand, we went through the research, we sent stuff out. That's going to be a topic that you're going to get even from people looking at resale is, okay, well, what could I buy new? And some of the best opportunities out there right now is builders that have new inventory that's ready to move into, or 60 days they can move into it. So
True.
make sure you follow that marketplace. Okay.
That
Doesn't
may
matter
put a
where
little
you,
bit of, sorry, that may put a little bit of
yeah,
pressure on the resale market in condos. Absolutely. I
yeah,
was thinking that, like, if you wanted a downtown condo and wanted to be on the water, that Tridel building, that that copper colored Tridel building has exactly that. Builders are still holding. You could do the paperwork now and get the rebate. Um, it's not selling at a price that is similar to the resale market, but you're getting into a brand new building for better than your neighbors with the rebates.
yeah.
Yeah.
And so, make sure, and when I say make sure you understand that in any community, because, even our clients that are looking at doing a custom build in Thornbury, I met with them when we were first looking at resales, and then it was like, okay, well, then we got to do, we look at it, then they go, okay, well, we got to change something, we got to put money into it. And I just said to them, look, I still think the best thing is for you to build on that lot that your parents have in town. And I did meet with the builder, and then we were looking at doing something for them. And then they said, well, there's also a builder we know in town. And I said, great. And I said, that's the route you want to go? Totally get it. And I sent them all of the documentation that we went through on the last week, talking about which day they have to start if they're building their own and not buying from a builder. There was a different start date. There was a different finish date. I said, if you guys can build, if you can build, you proceed. Make sure your builder's aware of this timing, because the price range you're building in, you could possibly, be able to get up to about $130,000 back. And I said, that really is going to make your build really, really budget proof. And they, submit. Yeah, you know what? They ended up where they decided they're going to build directly versus buy something. So maybe I don't get a sale, but giving them the information, helping them go through everything, I know there's business down the road. Yeah, Nancy?
I'm assuming that would already also apply to somebody who wants to have a tiny home put on a piece of vacant land, because the tiny homes are typically prefabbed, like off-site, and then they come and
Yes,
pretty much assemble them on the lot. So I'm assuming
yes,
that that would still apply to that.
yes, it does. And actually, my luncheon meeting yesterday was exactly that builder.
Hmm.
So very, very familiar with that product. And yes, because they're any part of the HST that is in a new building on your own property, has to be started you have to basically get your building permit by a certain day. And then I think it's within a year or by the end of next year, I think. But it'll be in the stuff that we did last week. And so whatever portion of that build out is HST, you can apply to get that portion back. And so depending on where that is, like, the garden suites that, I'm looking at helping this builder start marketing in Toronto, laneway homes, they are usually about a $500,000 purchase price. So that is start to finish. That's doing the permits, doing the services, all ends about 500,000. So, but there's HST over there. So you're not going to get the full amount, but you're going to get a portion, right, of that back. Okay. So it doesn't matter if they do build themselves, if they're buying something from, equipment, lumber and stuff from Home Depot, and they can show that it's a new build. They went through the proper process. It's all been permitted and stuff. They can apply for that HST back.
Good to know.
Okay. And that was all in the stuff last week. So make sure that you review it, because it might even apply. I don't know if it'll apply to a cottage, because it has to be a owner occupied unit. Okay. Now there was a portion in there that talked about if you're buying a rental unit. So like a garden suite or a laneway home that is turning into a rental unit, as long as you have a 1-year lease and it's not an Airbnb or short term, then it will qualify for the HST rebate. Okay.
That's actually really good to know.
Anything else going on? Okay, well, I have to ask, how was the conference, that liberal event you were at in, I think, Montreal, Quebec?
Montreal.
It was in Montreal, and
Uh-huh.
so I was hanging out with 4,500 of my best friends from across Canada.
Nice.
It was felt a little more, and somebody else said this, a blogger said this, or podcaster said, felt more like a rally than a conference, because there was a lot of vibe going on. The speeches were terrific. We met lots of members of parliament and senators. There were a few senators there kind of under the table just walking around. I met Althea Raj, which was kind of cool. Everybody was pretty positive. The Prime Minister's speech at the end of the conference was pretty vibrant. The room was going mad, basically. Did some sessions. I did a very large session on AI with the minister in charge of that. It was very, very interesting. And then, of course, some of the in the weeds conferences, breakout rooms on fundraising and other things like that. But it was really good. It was really, really good.
Any discussion on the economy in general? Were there any economists there or anything like that?
So I did not see Minister Champagne's speech, but I know because I was, it happened during a time when I was on I was on a bit of a field trip. I went on a cargo ship for a tour, which was arranged.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'll tell you about that offline. It was pretty incredible. Those babies are big, bigger than I expected. So I did miss that, but I know he's delivering the budget on April 29th, I think it is. So there'll be a lot going on up to that. Mm-hmm.
Good. Okay, super.
But I don't think much has changed other than, our relationship with the U.S. It's my feeling that the government is just kind of waiting for them to work out their stuff, and we're just going ahead with our plans without them. And if they fit into the plan, then they fit into the plan. But I think there were some quotable things from many speeches on the weekend, and that seems to be the way things are going.
Good. Yeah, Nancy.
Well, Julie and I spoke when she was on the train on the way home. So after that, I did go on YouTube. All of the speeches from that conference can be found on YouTube. I watched the entire Carney speech the other day. It was good. It was good.
Yeah. I have to
Yeah,
catch
and
up on a couple I missed, so.
good. And so, and the reason why I wanted to ask that is consumers, even, politicians, people that support politics, they're all consumers, right? So the vibe that you get at some of those events will be either they feel like the economy is going in the right direction or there's challenges. And I really feel we've gone through a bunch of challenges the last 3-4 years. And that's why we're starting to see Canadian consumers go, okay, that's enough. I know what we're dealing with. Let's move forward. Um, and that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. And that's why I think, Nancy, you're seeing people who are finally going like, okay, you know what, we've been holding off maybe about, do we buy, do we not buy, do we buy a recreational property or not? Where now they're just going like, you know what, I got to live my life. And I think that's where people are at. So,
I have to
and
totally
that's
agree with
why,
that.
right? And that's why it's important to have the ongoing conversations, having coffees with people and just chatting versus an email versus, like, yeah, I put my newsletters out, but if I don't reach out to them and just, casually say, hey, how are things going? You don't know where they're at. So really important to have those conversations. But I believe the consumers right now, and you will still always get, they're always going to get the consumers that are, no, I don't think I think something else is going to happen. I'm going to wait and see, going to wait and see. And in some cases, they might be right, but in most cases, you cannot find the bottom and you can never find the top. And people that do, unfortunately, well, the odd time they win, but majority of the time they won't. So, and that's what I've seen over the years. So my feeling based on everybody I'm talking with from all different parts of Ontario, everybody is looking at, we're in a marketplace now where they see some stability and some confidence coming back into the marketplace. And part of it was this HST, GST rebate, because what you have to understand is the housing market drives everything. If you're not buying a house, you're not buying a new appliance, you're not going out and putting blinds in, you're not having to go out and buy a new lawnmower. So the whole thing is, and that's where I think the government, especially in Ontario, came about and basically said, look, we got to get the housing market. We know the housing market pushes everything. It pushes renovations. It employs people. If people aren't going to spend money on their house or making a move, if they feel like they felt the last few years, where they're scared. And I think that part is now being alleviated. So the market is there and it's gonna continue to get better. That's what I'm hearing. That's what I'm seeing. That's what my gut tells me. That's why I'm really, as I said earlier, Michelle and I are really doubled down on speaking with our database and saying, look, if you're thinking of buying, this is the time. This is the year to do it. So, what else? I'm getting a listing in Nobleton. If anybody is getting a 3-bedroom bungalow right in Nobleton, it's going to be listed at $1,495,000. She paid much more than that for it in 2022, but basically said, you know what? Her custom home is finally, she moved in, so let's sell it. So, here's an interesting part about that is we looked at how long do you have to wait for it to come back to being worth what you paid for it? Could be 5-6 years, right? And, and she's a very smart person. She's done very, very well. And I said, but if you look at taking the equity out, what can you do with that equity over the next 5 years? Can you invest it to get a higher return than 3 or 4% annually for the next 5 years? Her answer was absolutely, I can. So we looked at that, having that conversation, and said, okay, in your case, then it makes sense for you to take the loss. Might be a possibility to write it down to some degree as a loss, take that equity, reinvest it over the period of the next 5 years, and recoup, if not all, most of the losses she had. So just, not, it's another avenue if you're talking with people. If they're in a situation where they have another place they're already living in and this equity is just sitting there. Okay. It's also a good conversation to have if they are looking at where they're looking to move up. Yeah, they may have to take a bit of a loss on their place, but if they're looking to buy up or move locations, there's opportunities there where they could get into a bigger property, bigger house with a smaller gap than what it would be in a busier marketplace. Okay. So it's really important to have the discussions with the client on, what is it that they're trying to do? And you have to be in a position where you're okay asking the questions on, how much financing is actually on here? Are you up to date on everything? So you need to be able to feel confident enough and be able to say how to ask those questions. And just let them know, look, for me to give you the best advice possible, we have to work on this together. And then if you share with me at least some of this information, then I can guide you better. And depending on the information we have, it may be best you stay, it may be best you move. We don't know that until we have all the information. So really important to have those conversations and ask the questions, right? What else? What else is going on? Yeah, Nancy.
I can speak for Elroy. He's got one coming up, waterfront, not far from here. We had a discussion about it yesterday. So that's really good news. I'm not going to disclose too much more about that, but we did discuss price.
Okay.
Because I'm very, very, very familiar with the location. So that's good.
Okay, good. I've got a really neat house coming up in Stony Creek, across from the water. You can get water views from the second story. Probably the end of April. It's probably going to be about 2122. But it's put $1 million into it over the last probably 7 years in additions, but a really cool house. It's going to be for a very unique buyer. Michelle's been there, and it's a pretty cool house. It's got a cigar lounge built in the basement area, completely vented. His garage can hold 6 cars probably. The whole house is wired to Alexa. So literally you want anything to operate. Like it was simple as Alexa, turn on the air hockey game. Boom, the air hockey game comes on. Set the temperature here. In his kitchen, you're there, and the kitchen is set up so that it's an industrial kitchen. Like it's got industrial stoves. It's
Very
good. And then after dinner, you decide you want to, turn the kitchen floor into a dance hall. All of a sudden, he says, Alexa, turn on the disco lights. And the whole house has all these multicolored lights that come on. The outside has water features. They've got an upstairs outdoor patio over, you can see the lake from. It's going to be a pretty cool house, but it's going to be for a really unique buyer. So that's coming up. The one in Nobleton's coming up. There's something else we're working on.
Our neighbors.
Oh, yeah, may have property on my street, backs onto the marsh and then overlooking the lake. That's possibly coming up by September. And these are all people that were over the last few years, right? Are going, we're not quite sure, not quite sure. And then it's like, you know what? We're ready. Let's get ready. So, and that's why it's just a matter, you just got to keep talking to people. And then we've got 3 or 4 buyers that are, sons or daughters of longtime clients of ours that are first-time buyers. And they're going like, you know what? I think it's time to buy. So, and all of that is just communication, reaching out, communicating. So, and then anything else? No.
I'll tell a story. So those of you that know Matthew, he owns his own painting company. And I guess through that, he's met a lot of people, but he's met this gentleman who owns commercial land that buddies up to the Barrie Airport. And so it's 11.5 acres. And so he got this lead and he's like, what do I do? I said, you call Alroy immediately. And so him and Alroy actually had a listing presentation on Friday. I think it was Thursday or Friday. And yeah, it was like hours long, this listing presentation, but he said it went really well. So fingers crossed for them that continues to go well. But yeah, and that was just through his chatting with people and his other connections through different industries, stuff like that. I guess this guy had the property listed with someone else in the area. And that relationship fizzled out. So he was looking for someone else and knew that Matthew was also a real estate agent. So yeah.
Right? So you don't know. You just don't know. Just talk to people. Talk to lots of people. The rest of this year, it's going to be a good year for agents that are working. It's not going to be easy, but there are people that are going to be making decisions, buying and selling. And so it's a matter of being out there, making sure you're doing all of your, all your homework, being informed of what's going on in the marketplace, being able to answer that question. I think I'm going to wait for the bottom. What's going to happen with the interest rates? What's going on in different communities? I talked at a meeting with a very large, this guy actually handles a lot of the farmers across Canada, their investment money, and they strictly build between buildings that are between minimum 6, maximum 20 to 22 units. And they're strictly built for rental units. They're actually doing 2 projects in Barrie, but most of the stuff they've been doing over the last 10 years has been in Hamilton area and been very successful at it. And I said to him, I said, so if, based on all of your experience and where do you see, this market going? He says, I know people think the Niagara region, Welland and all that stuff and Hamilton. And he said, we are really bullish on it. We see, and we're just based on activity that we're seeing, the rental rates are quite strong there. The listing that we have in Thorold, we just put it for lease as well. Put it for lease based on the one across the street leased for $2,900. Same house. Builder built the same house. And our guy would rather sell it. But I said, look, like if you can, for a year, if you can get some cash flow rather than sitting vacant, He says, yeah, let's put a ridiculous number on it. Okay, I said, let's put 3,600 a month. He come back, let's do 3,650. He says, don't expect anybody coming. But within 3 days, we get an offer to lease.
I hadn't even put it on socials yet.
And we're working through it because the owner really doesn't want to lease it. So he's trying to make it difficult, right, for the tenant to say yes. And I'm going, okay. But here's the interesting fact. The person looking to lease it is a doctor working at Niagara, has been contracted to work in the Niagara region hospitals. And that big hospital is pretty well almost done. And so that whole area is an opportunity. And the other area that these investors are looking at that they see as being a good investment opportunity because of the rents that are there is actually Oshawa. So they basically have pinpointed, they're doing a few things in Barrie, but then they're going to be doing a lot more in Welland and all around the Niagara region, and they're looking at stuff in Oshawa. So I found that very interesting and this is a pretty high-powered company. It's very quiet, but it's very well funded. So if they're looking in those different regions, they've done all their studies and everything. So I just know that, the Niagara, around that Niagara hospital, I know agents have been looking for land there, and it's hard to find. People have been buying it up. Because once you get the hospital, then you get all the support, you get all the different medical centers that open up. Then you start getting the subdivisions that are around. And I know Anita and Jason, they don't live far from there. So they are really been involved with a lot of stuff that's been going on there. I'm very familiar with it. So next time you see them or communicate with them, you may want to ask, because they've got some pretty good insight, because they've been actually talking a lot with the city and the region. So, okay, just good information to have, because it'll go back to answering that question, Julia, as are we at the bottom? Well, when I start seeing big investment companies buying up blocks of condominiums, I see other people that build purpose-built rentals, basically going, this is the area, this is what we're doing. And he said this year they're looking to build 10 of them. He said, normally we build 3 to 5. He said, this year, because we have so many investors now looking to invest into the real estate side as purpose-built rentals, he said, we think we might be able to build 10 of them if we can find the exact land that we need. So that's how I would be starting to tell the stories about, are we at the bottom yet? Okay. All right. Anybody have a buyer that you need something for? What are you looking for?
I have a
Anybody?
buyer that's been a bit slow moving. I've shown places, but there seems to be a lot of gaps in between appointments, and I've had the conversation about interest rates and requalifying the rate, et cetera, et cetera. They're looking for something that has maybe an artist space, something with light where an artist could paint and do those things, those types of things. So, and they're looking in the GTA, and part of the issue is their geographic area is just way too large. It's been all over the place. So we've been kind of to Georgetown, to Markham, to
Oh my gosh.
oh yeah. So yeah, they want to be kind of close to walkable things, but are kind of looking in a lot of different places. So Oakville, I've shown in Oakville. Yeah. So
What kind of budget?
it's so they would prefer a smaller budget, which is why they're looking outside, like outside of the Toronto area. And they'd also like to maybe do some work themselves. So they would like to hold some money back there, but Oh, I think they're they're looking at places between, seems to be, the really good deals in the 8s and the
Okay.
1 2s, 1 3s. So it's a big band.
And
And
and then the artist space, does it have to be attached to the house? Can it be a separate
no,
building?
no, it can be separate. Hmm. Yeah. So even a house with a laneway suite.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Okay. All right. We'll see.
But
We might
yeah,
looking at all kinds of different stuff. So cool.
I have to say one other thing. I've been looking for a furnished rental for somebody, and in the city of Toronto, furnished rentals are gone. There's nothing around here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know if people are holding back because of FIFA coming and they're holding their properties to get big money for 3 months.
Yeah.
Because I do know of one person in particular that plans to rent out their house and get out of Dodge during FIFA. So go to the cottage basically. So yeah, I'm really struggling to find something for somebody. Mhm.
I believe you are right on that.
I'm sure I'm right.
There
Yeah.
are, I have a couple people that are basically saying, you know what, it's going to be nuts in the city. Why don't I just move out? Let's, rent my place, for the period of time that soccer's here. And I'm saying, yeah, that's a good possibility. It could be done. It's going to be a lot of short-term rental stuff because people are going to be coming and going, if you're okay with that. And it's a matter of one, depending on where they are, can they do it in the location they're in? Are there restrictions? And two, who's going to manage that?
Yeah. You have to realize too that there's a lot of people coming into town to set up and tear down. So they'd be looking for maybe at least 3 months.
Okay.
Because there's a big machine that comes into events like this. I know my husband worked on the Pan Am project, and the number of people that just travel around the world doing these large events is there's a lot of them. So um, it's not
Okay.
just 1 week at a time. And the people that are looking at 1 week at a time are looking for smaller units, not houses. So
Right.
yeah.
Okay. Good. Well, another interesting way of looking at it then, if you've got we have anybody in that situation.
Yeah.
Cool. On a side note, if you are ever driving along the QE, I know Nancy, that's not going to happen, but if you are then the QE going downtown, um, if you look at where they are doing the soccer, they're playing at BMO Field, they've added in the whole one end of these. I guess they had to add so many seats to be able to qualify. So these are temporary seats that are on, let's call them bleachers. Literally, they're like this. And from the back, all you're looking at is scaffolding. And I'm thinking, I can't imagine those stands full of people jumping up and down, and the movement of it is just so. I guess it's too bad that Matthew's not here to tell us about it because he's down at that stadium all the time for all the TFC games. But from the back on the highway, man, it looks like you better not be afraid of heights. That top row is above the roof line of the regular building there. So it's, if you happen to be down in that area, just have a look at it, or even you may want to be able to just go on and Google, or I'm sure there's lots of information on it, but they've added thousands and thousands of seats and it's vertical. So cool. Well, and that starts soon, right? June. I think it starts in June somewhere. So lots of activity in the city, um, lots of activity in real estate. It's there. It's, there. I'm sure when they, the news is going to start picking up on it. We see it firsthand. Make sure you do your research. Make sure you're on top of it. analyzing what's going on, checking into the little niche markets that you work, looking at your database, letting them know what's going on. And the ones that are going to be working are going to have a really good year.
I think the
Right.
downtown core during FIFA is going to dry up in real estate. I'm not sure how agents are going to be showing condos downtown. Really,
Yeah.
I mean, there'll be road closures. You'd have to live there to be able to drive into sections. So I'm not sure how many showings I'll be doing down there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point, right? So double
Watch
check
the
those
road
things.
closures going through the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, well, exciting. It's good to see for the city. You know, it's pretty exciting. It's just a matter of just, be cautious but just keep talking to people about, this is going to be another, the other aspect of it too is this event is also going to highlight Toronto, right, internationally. So, with everything that's going on, then this may spur on some people that may reconsider the GTA and Ontario as a place to invest again. So, okay. All right. Anything else that we had to cover? For those attending tomorrow, we will see you at the awards. That's tomorrow. Same location, just by Square One in the City Hall, 12th floor. Anything else to remind them of?
No. Starts at noon. Food. There'll be tons of food, drink. We have about 40 people coming, so similar to last year. So I think it'll be good. Different brokerages are coming within Realty Executives. So Frank Cavello's office, that's Realty Executives Priority One. Jim Common, Realty Executives Group in Thornhill. So I think get some new faces in there and chat and mingle and
Yeah, it's also going to be a good time, good understanding of what's going on in other areas,
Yeah.
right? So if you want to ask the questions on where's the activity, here's some people that work different areas.
yeah.
So, okay. All right, everybody, if there's nothing else, great to see you here. We will hopefully see your smiling faces tomorrow. All right,
It's not going to snow, so I'll be there.
you're okay. You just be cautious with all the flooding up there.
Yeah.
So,
It's brutal. Like, it's brutal.
yeah, I did hear, on a side, I did hear that actually Nadine was telling me that there's some severe flooding in Lake Muskoka as well, just with the water levels.
Bad.
So, okay, well, safe travels, whoever's coming in, and we'll see you tomorrow.
See you
Thanks,
tomorrow.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.